I was sitting in my lawyer's office when my phone buzzed. It was my grandson, Charles. His voice sounded strange, almost rehearsed, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "Grandma Margaret, we need to talk about your living situation. Uncle Leo and Aunt Penelope agree that you can't keep living alone in that big house. We found a nice facility for you. Very affordable. You'll love it. Affordable. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. I'm 73 years old. And I've been around long enough to know that when family members start using words like affordable and nice facility, what they really mean is they found the cheapest nursing home they could. Locate on Google. Charles, baby, I'm doing just fine in my house. Your grandfather built that house with his own 2 hands. Grandma, you're being unreasonable. We've already made the arrangements. We're moving you next week. And about the house and your accounts, we think it's best if I handle those from now on. You know, to simplify things for you. Simplify. Another one of those words that sounds helpful but really means we're taking everything you own. I hung up without saying goodbye. My lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, was looking at me with concern. He'd heard every word. "Mrs. Washington, what do you want to do?" What did I want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I looked at the documents spread across his desk. Bank statements showing accounts worth over $5 million. Property deeds for the house my husband James had built, plus 3 rental properties, investment portfolios, life insurance policies. Everything James and I had worked 50 years to build. My husband had been a construction foreman who invested every extra dollar he earned. I had been a school principal who never spent more than we needed. Together, we'd built something most folks in our neighborhood never dreamed was possible. And now my own family wanted to warehouse me in some cut-rate nursing home while they divided up everything we'd worked for. Mr. Rodriguez, I want you to help me teach them a lesson they'll never forget. That was 6 months ago. And let me tell you, what happened next was the most satisfying thing I've done since I retired from running Eastside Elementary School. You see, Charles, Leo, and Penelope had no idea that I knew about their little plan. They thought I was just a forgetful old lady who didn't understand modern finance. But what they didn't know was that I had been watching them for years. Charles, my oldest grandson, was 35 years old and had never held a job for more than 18 months. He was always chasing the next big opportunity, the next startup idea, the next get-rich-quick scheme. He lived in a fancy apartment downtown that he couldn't afford, drove a car he was 3 payments behind on, and wore clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Leo, my younger son, was 52 and had spent his entire adult life being jealous of his older brother Marcus, Charles's father, who had actually made something of himself before he passed away 10 years ago. Leo worked as a regional manager for a logistics company, made decent money, but spent it faster than he earned it. His wife had left him 5 years ago, taking half of everything, and he'd been bitter ever since. And Penelope. Oh, Penelope. My daughter, my baby girl, 50 years old and still acting like the world owed her something. She'd married well, or so she thought, until her husband ran off with his secretary and left her with a mountain of credit card debt. She lived in a townhouse she was about to lose and drove a leased Mercedes she couldn't afford. What all 3 of them had in common was simple. They saw me as a bank account with a pulse, and they were tired of waiting for that pulse to stop. I found out about their plan the old-fashioned way. I was supposed to be napping one Sunday afternoon when they all gathered at my house for what they thought was a private conversation in my living room. But I was upstairs, and the air vent carried every word straight to my bedroom. "Look, the old lady's got millions just sitting there," Charles said. I could hear ice clinking in a glass. He was probably drinking my good bourbon. "She doesn't even know how much she has. I checked her mail last week when she was in the bathroom. Bank statements showing over $5 million in various accounts." $5 million? That was Penelope, her voice going up like it did when she was excited. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Plus the house, which is probably worth $800,000 in this market. and those rental properties Dad told me about before he died. So, what's the play? Leo asked. Always direct, that one. We get her declared incompetent. I already talked to a lawyer about it. We just need to show she can't manage her own affairs. Then, we get guardianship, move her into some cheap facility, and divide everything up. But Mom's sharp as a tack, Penelope said. How are we going to prove she's incompetent? Charles laughed. It was an ugly sound. Easy. We document every time she forgets something. We make sure her doctors know she's confused. We talk about how worried we are. And if that doesn't work, we just wait her out. She's 73. How much longer can she really last? I stood there in my bedroom, my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. My own family, my own blood, talking about me like I was already dead and buried. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't just some confused old lady. I had spent 35 years as a school principal dealing with lying teenagers, manipulative parents, and scheming administrators. I knew every trick in the book, and I was about to write a few new chapters. The next morning, I called Mr. Rodriguez and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Washington, what you're describing is elder financial abuse. We can prosecute them. I know we can, but I don't want them in jail, Mr. Rodriguez. I want them to learn something. I want them to understand what they were trying to destroy. What did you have in mind? How familiar are you with the concept of restorative justice? Mr. Rodriguez smiled. He understood exactly where I was going. Over the next few months, we put together a plan. Mr. Rodriguez worked with another lawyer to set up what looked like a routine competency evaluation. Charles, Leo, and Penelope were so eager to push it through that they didn't bother reading the fine print. What they didn't realize was that I was documenting everything, every conversation, every attempt to isolate me from my friends, every time they tried to confuse me or make me seem forgetful. I had recordings. I had witnesses. I had a case file that would make any prosecutor smile. But I wasn't going to the prosecutors. Not yet. The competency hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late October. Charles, Leo, and Penelope all showed up in their Sunday best, looking somber and concerned. They'd even practiced their worried family member faces. The judge, a sharp-eyed black woman named Henderson who'd been on the bench for 20 years, looked at them over her reading glasses. I understand you're seeking guardianship of Margaret Washington on the grounds that she's unable to manage her own affairs? Yes, Your Honor, Charles said, standing up like he was in a courtroom drama. We're deeply concerned about Grandma's mental state. She's been forgetting things, making poor decisions, and we fear she's vulnerable to exploitation. Judge Henderson nodded slowly. I see. And Mrs. Washington, do you have legal representation? That's when Mr. Rodriguez stood up. Charles, Leo, and Penelope looked confused. They'd specifically not told me about the hearing until the last minute, thinking I wouldn't have time to get a lawyer. Your Honor, I represent Mrs. Washington, and we'd like to present some evidence to the court. What followed was the most beautiful 45 minutes of my life. Mr. Rodriguez played recordings of Charles, Leo, and Penelope discussing their plan to take my money. He showed bank records proving that Charles had been stealing from me for months, taking small amounts he thought I wouldn't notice. He presented testimony from my doctor confirming that I was in perfect mental health. He showed emails where Penelope had researched cheapest nursing homes in the state. With each new piece of evidence, I watched their faces change. First, confusion, then shock, then fear, and finally, the terrible realization that they'd been caught. When Mr. Rodriguez finished, Judge Henderson looked at the three of them with the kind of expression that made grown men squirm. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You three conspired to have your own mother and grandmother declared incompetent so you could steal her money and put her in a substandard facility? Nobody answered. What could they say? Your Honor, Mr. Rodriguez said, Mrs. Washington would like to address the court. I stood up slowly, using my cane for effect even though I didn't really need it. I wanted them to see the woman they'd tried to throw away. Judge Henderson, these are my children and my grandson. I raised them. I loved them. I sacrificed for them. And they repaid that love by trying to steal everything my husband and I built and lock me away like I was trash. Penelope started crying. Charles was staring at the floor. Leo looked like he wanted to disappear. But here's the thing about getting old, I continued. You learn that revenge is empty. Punishment doesn't change hearts. What changes hearts is understanding, empathy, walking in someone else's shoes. Mrs. Washington, Judge Henderson said gently, what are you proposing? I run a community center called Hope Center. We provide services for seniors in our neighborhood, meals, activities, health screenings, companionship. We serve about 200 elderly folks every week, many of them much worse off than me. I turned to face Charles, Leo, and Penelope. Here's my offer, and it's the only one you're going to get. You have two choices. Choice 1. Mr. Rodriguez files criminal charges for elder abuse, theft, and fraud. You go to trial. You probably go to jail. Your lives are destroyed. Or choice 2. You work at Hope Center for the next 5 years. Full-time. No pay. You serve the very people you thought were worthless. You learn what it means to value elders as human beings, not bank accounts. That's slavery! Charles burst out. No, baby, I said calmly. Slavery is when you have no choice. You have a choice. Choose jail if you want. I got time. Judge Henderson leaned forward. Mrs. Washington, this is highly unusual. I know, Your Honor. But I believe in second chances. I believe people can change if they're forced to face what they've done. And I believe my family is worth saving, even if they don't believe in themselves. There was a long silence in that courtroom. Finally, Judge Henderson spoke. I'm going to allow this, with conditions. First, this arrangement will be supervised by the court. Monthly reports, random check-ins. Any violation and the criminal charges proceed immediately. Second, at the end of 5 years, if Mrs. Washington determines you've genuinely changed and learned the lessons she's trying to teach, she may choose to leave you an inheritance. The amount will be entirely at her discretion. How much? Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. That's not the point of this exercise, I said sharply. But since you asked, if you complete the 5 years, and I believe you've genuinely changed, you'll each get $500,000. Not the millions you were trying to steal. $500,000 each. Maybe, I let that sink in. They'd been plotting to take $5 million and split it 3 ways, plus all my properties. Now they were looking at 5 years of hard work for maybe $500,000 each, and only if I decided they'd earned it. That's not fair, Penelope cried. Neither is trying to steal your mother's life savings and lock her in a cheap nursing home, Judge Henderson said coldly. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. They chose the work. Of course they did. Pride might be strong, but the fear of prison is stronger. That first day at Hope Center was something I'll never forget. Charles showed up in his expensive sneakers and designer jeans, looking like he was about to film a rap video. Leo wore his work suit like armor, trying to maintain some dignity. Penelope had on heels and a dress better suited for a cocktail party. I introduced them to Dorothy Jenkins, the 82-year-old woman who ran the day-to-day operations of Hope Center. Dorothy was 4 feet 11 inches of pure steel, a retired Army nurse who'd seen combat in Vietnam and didn't take nonsense from anybody. So these are the ones who tried to throw you away, Margaret. Dorothy looked them up and down like they were recruits on their first day of basic training. Yes, ma'am, I said. Well, we'll see what they're made of. You, she pointed at Charles. You're on breakfast duty. Kitchen opens at 6 a.m. You'll be helping prepare and serve meals for 150 people. 6 in the morning? Charles looked horrified. I don't even wake up until 9. You do now, baby. You. Dorothy pointed at Leo. You're on transportation. We got a van that picks up seniors who can't drive themselves. You'll be doing 3 runs a day, helping folks in and out, carrying their groceries, whatever they need. Leo opened his mouth to protest. But one look from Dorothy shut him up. "And you," Dorothy fixed her eyes on Penelope, "you're going to be working directly with our residents, helping them with activities, listening to their stories, assisting with personal care when needed. Think you can handle that in those ridiculous shoes?" Penelope looked down at her $200 heels and then back at Dorothy. "I'll get different shoes." You do that. Now, all three of you, let me make something clear. These people you're going to be serving, they're just like your mama. They worked hard their whole lives. They raised families. They built communities. And now they're old. And some of them are alone. And some of them are scared. You're going to treat every single one of them with respect and dignity. You're going to learn their names. You're going to hear their stories. And maybe, just maybe, you'll figure out that old folks are people, not problems. You got me? "Yes, ma'am," they mumbled. I said, "You got me?" "Yes, ma'am." This time louder. "Good. Now get to work." The first few weeks were beautiful to watch. Charles, who'd never held a real job, was suddenly scrambling eggs at 6 a.m. for people he'd previously thought of as invisible. His expensive clothes got stained with grease and flour. His perfectly maintained hands got rough from washing dishes and mopping floors. Leo, who'd spent years managing other people, was now being managed by every elderly person who needed a ride. Mrs. Patterson needed him to carry her groceries up 3 flights of stairs. Mr. Johnson wanted him to wait while he slowly, carefully got out of the van, refusing to be rushed. Miss Gloria demanded he come inside and fix her leaky faucet while he was there. And Penelope, my baby girl who'd always been too good to visit me for more than an hour at a time, was now spending 8 hours a day with people who needed help eating, dressing, and getting to the bathroom. Her fancy nails broke. Her perfect hair got messed up. Her designer clothes got donated to Goodwill and replaced with scrubs. I watched them every day, though I tried not to let them see me watching. I saw the frustration, the exhaustion, the moments when they wanted to quit. But I also started to see something else. About 3 months in, I heard Charles laughing. Really laughing. Not his fake social media laugh. He was in the kitchen with Mr. Thompson, a 79-year-old retired chef who'd been teaching him how to make proper biscuits. Mr. Thompson was telling stories about working in a segregated restaurant in the 1,960 seconds. How he'd had to use the back entrance but still took pride in every dish he made. "Man, that's wild," Charles was saying, his hands deep in biscuit dough. "How did you deal with that?" "Baby, you deal with it by being so good they can't deny you," Mr. Thompson said. "You show up every day. You do excellent work. And you wait for the world to catch up to what you already know about yourself." I saw Charles nodding, really listening for maybe the first time in his life. 6 months in, Leo came to me after his shift. He looked tired but different, softer somehow. "Mama, can I talk to you?" We sat in my office at Hope Center. He was quiet for a long time. "Mrs. Patterson, you know, the lady on Elm Street? The one with the bad hip?" "Yeah." Today she told me I remind her of her son. He died in Iraq 15 years ago. Leo's voice cracked. She showed me pictures. He looked like me, same age. And she said driving with me to her doctor's appointments makes her feel like he's still around, taking care of her. "That's nice, Leo." "No, Mama, you don't understand. I made that woman feel good. Not because I gave her money or did something impressive, just because I showed up and helped her get where she needed to go. When's the last time I made anybody feel good just by being present? I didn't have an answer for that. And he didn't need one. 8 months in, Penelope had her breakthrough. There was a woman named Helen who came to Hope Center every day. Helen had dementia. Some days she knew where she was. Other days she thought she was 25 years old, waiting for her husband to come home from work. Her husband had been dead for 30 years. One afternoon, Helen got agitated. She wanted to go home. She needed to cook dinner. Her husband would be home soon, and he liked his dinner ready. Penelope, who used to get frustrated and call for Dorothy whenever Helen got confused, did something different that day. She sat down next to Helen and took her hand. "Tell me about your husband," Penelope said gently. "What was he like?" And Helen did. For 20 minutes, she talked about a man who'd loved her for 50 years, who'd brought her flowers every Friday, who'd built their house with his own hands, just like my James had done, who'd held her hand when their son was born and when their parents died. When Helen finished, she looked at Penelope with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for listening, baby. Nobody wants to hear an old woman talk about her memories." "I do," Penelope said. And she meant it. "Your memories are beautiful." I was watching from the doorway, and I saw my daughter cry for the first time since she was a little girl. Not angry tears or frustrated tears. Tears of genuine emotion. That night, Penelope came to my house. Just showed up at 8 p.m., something she never did. "Mama, I'm sorry." "I know, baby." "No, you don't know. You can't know how sorry I am." She was crying hard now. "I listened to Helen today talk about her husband, and all I could think about was you and Daddy. How you two built something real, something that lasted. And I tried to take that away from you. I tried to take your memories and your dignity and lock you up somewhere so I could have money I didn't earn." I pulled her into my arms, this 50-year-old woman who was my baby girl, and let her cry. "Why did you let us do this, Mama? Why didn't you just have us arrested?" "Because I'm your mother, Penelope. And a mother's job isn't to give up on her children, even when they give up on themselves. Your father and I raised you better than what you became. I wanted to give you a chance to remember who you really are." 1 year in, things had settled into a routine. Charles had stopped complaining about the early mornings. He'd actually started coming in early to prep the kitchen before the breakfast rush. Leo had learned the name of every person he transported, knew their schedules, their doctors, their grandchildren's names. Penelope had become Helen's primary caregiver and had started a memory book program where residents could record their stories for their families. But the real test came on a Tuesday afternoon in their 14th month. A new resident came to Hope Center. His name was Marcus, and he was homeless. He was 68 years old, hadn't bathed in weeks, and smelled like he'd been living on the streets, which he had been. He had mental health issues and a drinking problem. He was everything most people crossed the street to avoid. Dorothy brought him in and called Charles, Leo, and Penelope together. "This is Marcus. He needs help, real help, not just a meal and a shower. He needs someone to see him as human. Who wants to take lead on getting him set up?" There was a moment of silence. The old Charles, Leo, and Penelope would have made excuses, would have passed him off to someone else, would have been disgusted. But my grandson spoke first. "I'll do it. Come on, Marcus, let's get you cleaned up and fed. Then we'll figure out what you need." I watched Charles lead this broken man to the shower facilities, talking to him gently, treating him with dignity. Leo immediately started making calls to social services, setting up appointments, getting Marcus into the system. Penelope found clean clothes and started organizing a care plan. They worked together, my family, to help someone who had nothing to offer them in return. No money, no status, no benefit to themselves. That's when I knew they were going to make it. 2 years in, the transformation was complete. Charles had lost his taste for expensive clothes and expensive living. He'd moved out of his fancy apartment into a modest place he could actually afford. He'd started taking online classes in social work. He told me he wanted to open his own community center one day, but he wanted to learn how to do it right. Leo had reconciled with his ex-wife. Not romantically, but they'd become friends again. She told me later that he was different, humbler, more present. He'd started volunteering at a veterans center on weekends, working with elderly vets who reminded him of the folks he drove every day. Penelope had gone back to school too, becoming a certified nursing assistant. She'd started dating again, but carefully this time. She told me she'd learned the difference between a man who wanted to take care of her and a man who wanted her to take care of him. Year 3 was when they stopped asking about the money. They stopped talking about inheritances and wills. They just showed up every day and did the work. Charles started a cooking class at Hope Center, teaching residents how to make healthy meals on a budget. Leo organized a transportation cooperative, getting other volunteers to help with the growing demand. Penelope launched a program that paired elderly residents with college students, creating intergenerational friendships. They weren't doing it for me anymore. They were doing it because it mattered. Year 4, I started getting sick. Nothing serious, just the regular wear and tear of being 77 years old. But I had to cut back my hours at Hope Center. Had to let Dorothy take over more of the day-to-day operations. And you know who stepped up? Charles, Leo, and Penelope. Without being asked, without complaining, they took over my responsibilities. They kept Hope Center running. They made sure every resident was cared for. One night, Charles came to my house with dinner. He'd cooked it himself, nothing fancy, just baked chicken, greens, and cornbread, but it was perfect. Grandma, I need to tell you something. What's that, baby? I don't want your money. I mean, if you want to give it to me at the end of the 5 years, I'll take it. But I don't need it. These past 4 years, I've learned something more valuable than money. What's that? I learned that respect isn't something you buy. It's something you earn. And I learned that the richest people I know aren't the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They're the ones with the fullest lives. Mr. Thompson has been married to the same woman for 55 years. Mrs. Patterson raised 6 kids on a teacher's salary. Helen and her husband built a life together that was so beautiful she still lives in it even when her mind is gone. That's wealth, Grandma. That's what you and Grandpa had. I squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, Charles. Don't be proud yet. I got 1 more year to go. Year 5 started with a crisis. Hope Center's main building failed a safety inspection. We needed $75,000 in repairs, and we needed them fast, or we'd have to close down. I was prepared to use my own money, but before I could, Charles, Leo, and Penelope came to me with a proposal. Don't pay for it, Charles said. What? We'll raise the money. Give us 6 months. We'll do it. They organized the biggest fundraising campaign our community had ever seen. Charles used his social media skills, but instead of promoting himself, he told the stories of Hope Center residents. Real stories. Powerful stories. Leo used his business connections, calling in favors, organizing corporate sponsorships. Penelope organized a series of events, bringing in the community, making it personal. In 4 months, they raised $100,000. The repairs were made. Hope Center was saved. And they'd done it without my money. They'd done it with hard work, creativity, and genuine love for what they were protecting. On the last day of year 5, exactly 60 months after they'd started, I called them to my house. Mr. Rodriguez was there. Dorothy was there. Judge Henderson was there. Well, I said, looking at the 3 of them, you made it. 5 years. You fulfilled the terms of our agreement. They sat quietly, waiting. Judge Henderson, what's your assessment? The judge had been monitoring their progress the entire time, doing random check-ins, reviewing reports, talking to Hope Center residents. Mrs. Washington, in 30 years on the bench, I've never seen anything like this. These 3 people came before me as thieves and con artists. They're leaving as community leaders. They've completed over 10,000 hours of service each. The testimonials I've received from Hope Center residents are extraordinary. By any measure, they've exceeded the requirements of your agreement. I nodded. Mr. Rodriguez, the envelopes, please. He handed me 3 sealed envelopes. I looked at Charles, Leo, and Penelope. I told you 5 years ago that if you completed your service, and I believed you genuinely changed, I would give you $500,000 each. These envelopes contain checks for that amount. I watched their faces. There was relief, yes, but also something else. Something like disappointment. You don't look happy, I said. Penelope spoke first. Mama, I'm grateful. But honestly, the money feels wrong now. Like we're being paid for something we should have done anyway. Go on. These past 5 years, I learned that I was empty. I had stuff, but I had no purpose, no meaning. Working at Hope Center gave me that. The money feels like it cheapens what we did. Leo nodded. I agree. What we did, we should have been doing all along. Not because of money or inheritance, but because it's right. Charles was last. Grandma, I know I was the ringleader of that stupid plan. I know I hurt you the most, and I know you don't owe me anything. These 5 years, they weren't punishment. They were a gift. You gave me a chance to become someone I'm actually proud to be. I don't need your money to know I'm rich. I smiled. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when they finally understood. Mr. Rodriguez, tear up those checks. Mama, what? Penelope looked confused. I said tear them up. You're right. The money would cheapen what you've done. I pulled out 3 different envelopes from my purse. These are the real envelopes. Inside each one is not a check, but something more valuable. Charles, yours contains the deed to the building where Hope Center operates. It's yours. Keep running it. Make it bigger. Make it better. Charles opened the envelope with shaking hands, his eyes filled with tears. Leo, yours contains the title to the van you've been driving for 5 years, plus funding to expand the transportation program. I want you to hire staff, get more vehicles, and serve more of our community. Leo couldn't speak. He just nodded, crying. And Penelope, baby, yours contains something special. It's the deed to a property on Morrison Street. It's currently empty. I want you to turn it into a residential facility. A real one. The kind where people are treated with dignity, where memory care means preserving stories, not just managing symptoms. I'll fund the startup costs. You run it. Penelope was sobbing now. Mama, that's more than 500,000. That's millions. I know. But it's not for you. It's for the work. It's for the community. You 3 will make a living from it, a good living. But you'll earn every penny by continuing to serve. But what about your money? Charles asked. All those millions we were trying to steal? Most of it's going into a trust that will fund community programs for the next 50 years. When I die, you'll each inherit a portion, but nothing close to what you would have gotten if you'd just been patient and decent 5 years ago. Consider it the price of your education. Judge Henderson stood up. Well, Mrs. Washington, I'd say your experiment was a success. It wasn't an experiment, Judge. It was faith. Faith that people can change when they're forced to see beyond themselves. Faith that my family could become who they were meant to be. Dorothy hugged each of them. I'm proud of y'all. When you started, I gave you 3 weeks before you quit, but you proved me wrong. Now don't make me regret saying that. After everyone left, it was just me and my family. My real family. Not the thieves who'd stood in my living room 5 years earlier plotting to rob me, but these new people they'd become. Grandma, Charles said softly, why did you really do this? You could have just cut us off. Let us face the consequences of our actions. Charles, baby, I'm 78 years old. I've lived a long life, made mistakes, hurt people, been hurt by people, and I learned something your grandfather used to tell me. Everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. But we didn't deserve it. No, you didn't. But love isn't about deserving. It's about believing. I believed that somewhere under all that greed and selfishness were 3 people I'd raised to be good. I believed that if I could strip away the nonsense and make you see what really matters, you'd find your way back. What if we hadn't? Leo asked. What if we'd failed? Then I would have been heartbroken. But I still would have tried. Because that's what family does. We don't give up on each other. Even when we probably should. Penelope came over and hugged me. I love you, Mama. And I promise I'll make you proud. Baby, you already have. That night, after they all left, I sat in my living room in the house James built, looking at the photos on the wall, pictures of a life well lived, a marriage that lasted 45 years, children raised, grandchildren loved, a community served, and now, a legacy that would continue long after I was gone. Not a legacy of money hoarded and fought over, but a legacy of service, of people learning to value each other, of redemption earned through hard work and genuine change. Charles came by the next morning with coffee and biscuits he'd made himself. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Kept thinking about everything. Having regrets? Only one. I regret the 3 years I wasted before all this happened. I could have been learning from you instead of plotting against you. Well, you're learning now. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything, baby. What made you think we could change? What made you believe we were worth saving? I thought about that for a moment. You remember when you were 7 years old and you stole $20 from my purse? Charles looked surprised. You knew about that? Of course I knew. Your grandfather wanted to punish you, really punish you. But I said no. Why? Because I watched you, Charles. After you took that money, I watched you struggle with it. You couldn't enjoy it. You couldn't spend it. And 3 days later, you snuck it back into my purse with a note that said, I'm sorry, Grandma. You were 7 years old, and you already knew the difference between right and wrong. You just needed reminding. I'd forgotten about that. I hadn't. And that's what I held on to when you were standing in my living room planning to rob me. I knew that little boy was still in there somewhere. He just needed to find his way back. Charles wiped his eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. 6 months later, Hope Center's expansion was complete. Charles had turned it into a model program that other communities were copying. Leo's transportation service was operating 5 vans and serving over 500 seniors. Penelope's memory care facility had a waiting list. They were making decent money, not rich, but comfortable. More importantly, they were making a difference. I attended the grand opening of Penelope's facility. She'd named it James and Margaret's place after me and her father. I tried to protest, but she insisted. Daddy built houses, Mama. You built people. This place is going to do both. Judge Henderson was there. So was Dorothy. So were about 200 people from the community, including many of the folks who'd been served by Hope Center over the past 5 years. Mr. Thompson was there with his wife, both of them grinning. Mrs. Patterson brought her whole family to celebrate. And Helen, sweet Helen with her dementia, had a moment of clarity and told everyone who would listen that Penelope is an angel who listens to old women's stories. During the ribbon cutting, Penelope gave a speech. My baby girl, who used to be too proud to visit me for more than an hour, stood in front of all those people and told the truth. 5.5 years ago, I was the worst version of myself. I tried to steal from my mother. I tried to lock her away in a cheap facility so I could take her money. I saw her as an obstacle, not as a person. The crowd was silent. This wasn't the usual feel-good opening speech. My mother could have had me arrested. She could have cut me off forever. Instead, she gave me something more valuable than money. She gave me a chance to become someone worth being. For 5 years, my brothers and I worked without pay at Hope Center, serving the very people we devalued. And slowly, through the stories of residents like Helen, through the dignity of people like Mr. Thompson, through the grace of people like Mrs. Patterson, we learned what it means to be human. Penelope's voice cracked, but she kept going. This facility isn't named after my parents because they gave me money. It's named after them because they gave me something money can't buy. They gave me purpose. They gave me redemption. And now, every person who walks through these doors will be treated the way my mother should have been treated all along. With respect, with dignity, with love. The applause was thunderous. I sat in my wheelchair, too tired to stand for long these days, and watched my daughter become the woman I'd always known she could be. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 30, nicely dressed, with a notebook in her hand. Mrs. Washington, I'm Jasmine Carter from the Tribune. I've been following your story. Would you be willing to do an interview? I looked at Mr. Rodriguez, who nodded. I suppose so, baby. What do you want to know? Everyone's calling what you did revolutionary. Restorative justice instead of punishment. Teaching instead of revenge. Some people say you're a saint. Others say you were too soft, that your family should have faced real consequences. What do you say? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. I say I'm not a saint. I'm a mother and a grandmother who refused to give up on her family. As for being too soft, well, ask Charles, Leo, and Penelope if working 5 years without pay, serving hundreds of people, having to face their own cruelty every single day was soft. But they could have gone to prison. Yes, they could have. And they would have come out angry, bitter, and no better than when they went in. Instead, they came out as people who understand what really matters. Which outcome serves the community better? Jasmine scribbled notes furiously. Some critics say you only did this because they're family, that you wouldn't extend the same grace to strangers. Those critics would be wrong. You see that young man over there? I pointed to Marcus, the homeless man who'd come to Hope Center 4 years ago. He was clean now, sober, and working as a volunteer coordinator. His name is Marcus. He came to us broken. We could have turned him away. Instead, we invested in him. Gave him the same thing I gave my family, a chance to be better. And what's the difference between mercy and enabling? Now that was a good question. Mercy requires accountability. Enabling avoids it. I didn't just forgive my family and give them money. I made them earn their redemption through years of hard work. I made them face the people they devalued. That's not enabling. That's education. Jasmine closed her notebook. One last question, Mrs. Washington. Do you have any regrets? Only one. I regret that it took a betrayal to teach my family what I should have taught them from the beginning. That wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in lives touched, in people helped, in communities built. But better late than never, I suppose. The interview ran in the Sunday paper with the headline, "From Thieves to Philanthropists. One grandmother's radical redemption plan." It went viral, as the young people say. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about restorative justice and alternative sentencing. Charles called me that Sunday morning, laughing. "Grandma, my phone is blowing up. People from all over the country want to know about Hope Center, about the program, about how we did it. And what are you telling them?" "I'm telling them the truth. That change is possible. But it's not easy. That you can't just talk about redemption, you have to live it. That serving others is the best way to save yourself." That's my grandson. Over the next year, the model we created was replicated in 15 cities. Judges started offering community service alternatives for elder abuse cases. Families started having hard conversations about how they treated their elderly members. But more importantly, Hope Center kept growing. Charles hired a staff of 12, all of them formerly incarcerated or in recovery, all of them given the same second chance he'd received. Leo's transportation service expanded to include wheelchair-accessible vans and volunteer drivers who were trained in dementia care. Penelope's facility became known as the best memory care facility in the state, with a waiting list a year long. And me? I kept showing up every day that my health allowed, not to manage or control, but to be present, to watch my family do the work they were born to do. One afternoon, about 18 months after the grand opening, I was sitting in the Hope Center common room when a young couple walked in with an elderly woman. They looked uncomfortable, like they didn't want to be there. The woman was probably 80, frail, confused looking. The couple was in their 42nd, well-dressed, impatient. "We need to talk to someone about placement," the man said to Dorothy. "My mother needs full-time care, and we can't provide it anymore." Dorothy looked at them with that sharp gaze of hers. "I see. And have you considered caring for her at home with support services?" "That's not realistic," the woman said quickly. "We both work. We have kids. We need a facility that can handle her." The elderly woman looked small and sad, like she knew she was being discussed, like a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. Charles had been in the kitchen but came out when he heard the conversation. "Hi, I'm Charles Washington. Can I talk to you folks for a minute?" He led them to a quiet corner, and I watched from across the room. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I saw their faces change. The defensive anger softened, The impatience turned to thoughtfulness. After about 20 minutes, they came back to Dorothy. "We'd like to learn more about the support services you mentioned," the man said. "Charles helped us understand that maybe we've been looking at this wrong." After they left, I called Charles over. "What did you tell them?" He smiled. "I told them my story. About how I tried to throw you away because I saw you as a burden instead of a blessing. About how I almost lost the most important relationship in my life because I was selfish. About how these past 6 years have taught me that taking care of elderly family members isn't a burden, it's a privilege." And they listened? They did. Because I wasn't preaching at them. I was confessing to them. Sometimes people need to hear from someone who's been where they are and found a better way. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I'd been doing since I was a young woman. "James, my love, I wish you could see what our family has become. Charles is running Hope Center like it's his calling, because it is. Leo is driving seniors around like each one is precious cargo, because they are. And Penelope, our baby girl, is creating a place where people's memories are honored and preserved, even when their minds are failing. They tried to throw me away, but in the process of saving them from themselves, they saved me too. They gave me a reason to keep fighting. They gave me hope that the next generation might do better than ours did. I'm tired now, James. These 78 years have been long and full. But I'm not done yet. Not while there's still work to do. Not while there are still families that need to learn what ours learned. Not while there are still elderly folks who need to know they matter. I love you, my dear husband, and I'm grateful every day that we built something worth fighting for. Not just money, but values. Not just property, but purpose. Not just wealth, but wisdom. I'll see you soon enough. But not yet, not yet. 2 years after Penelope's facility opened, I had a stroke. Not a major one, but enough to slow me down significantly. I could no longer go to Hope Center every day. My time was running short, and I knew it. Charles, Leo, and Penelope took turns staying with me. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One evening, all 3 of them were at my house. We were in the living room, the same room where I'd overheard their plot 7 years earlier. "Grandma," Charles said softly, "we need to talk about something. If this is about funeral arrangements, I've already handled it. It's not that. It's about the trust, the one with the rest of your money. After their 5-year service, I'd put most of my remaining wealth into a trust that would fund community programs. But there was still a significant amount left, about $2 million, that I hadn't designated. What about it? We want you to add it to the community trust," Leo said. "All of it." I looked at them in surprise. "You're sure? That's your inheritance we're talking about." "We don't need it, Mama," Penelope said. "We're making good livings from the work we do. More importantly, we're doing work that matters. That money can do more good in the community than it ever could in our bank accounts." "You've changed," I said, smiling. "You changed us," Charles replied. "And now we want to change others the way you changed us." I had Mr. Rodriguez draw up the papers that week. Every remaining dollar of my estate would go to the community trust, to be managed by a board that included Charles, Leo, Penelope, Dorothy, Judge Henderson, and 3 community members elected by Hope Center residents. The money would fund scholarships for social work students, expand transportation services for seniors, build more memory care facilities, and support families caring for elderly members at home. It would be my final lesson to my family. Wealth isn't something you hoard. It's something you share. Legacy isn't what you leave to your children. It's what you leave in them. 3 months later, I was in the hospital. The doctors said it was pneumonia, but I knew better. I was 79 years old, and I was tired. My body was ready to rest. Charles, Leo, and Penelope were by my bedside. So were Dorothy, Mr. Rodriguez, and Judge Henderson. My room was full of flowers from Hope Center residents, cards from people whose lives had been touched by our work. "Grandma," Charles said, holding my hand, "thank you for everything, for not giving up on us, for teaching us what really matters, for showing us that redemption is possible. You did the work, baby. I just gave you the opportunity. But you believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. I looked at the three of them, my family, and saw not the greedy thieves who'd plotted to rob me, but the compassionate leaders they'd become. Leo, keep driving those seniors around. Every single one of them is somebody's mother or father. Treat them that way. I will, Mama. Penelope, keep telling those stories. Keep preserving those memories. They're more valuable than gold. I promise, Mama. And Charles, my baby, keep feeding people. Not just their bodies, but their souls. Keep building community. Keep showing young people that there's a better way. I will, Grandma. I swear it. I closed my eyes, feeling peaceful for the first time in years. You know what the funny thing is? I said, my voice getting weaker. You thought you were going to steal $5 million from me, but what you got instead was worth so much more. You got purpose. You got redemption. You got to become people you're proud to be. We know, Grandma, Charles said, crying now. We know. And that's worth more than all the money in the world. Those were my last words. I died that night, surrounded by the family I'd saved and who had, in their own way, saved me. The funeral was the biggest our community had ever seen. Over 500 people attended. Every Hope Center resident who could make it was there. Dozens of families who'd been touched by Charles, Leo, and Penelope's work. Former students from my years as a principal. People I'd forgotten I'd helped over the decades. Judge Henderson gave the eulogy. Margaret Washington was a radical. She looked at our justice system and said, "There's a better way." She looked at her own family's betrayal and said, "There's a lesson here." She looked at human weakness and said, "There's strength waiting to emerge." She believed in redemption when others believed in punishment. She believed in transformation when others believed in condemnation. And because of her radical faith in human potential, hundreds of lives were changed, not just her family's lives, but the lives of every person they've served since. Charles spoke next, his voice steady despite his tears. My grandmother caught us trying to steal from her. She could have destroyed us. Instead, she rebuilt us. She didn't just punish our crime, she addressed our character. She didn't just take away what we tried to steal. She gave us something we never had: purpose. For 5 years, we worked without pay. We served people we'd once looked down on. We learned that elderly folks aren't burdens, they're blessings. We learned that wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched. We learned that the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most meaning. Grandma, you gave us that. You gave us meaning. And we're going to spend the rest of our lives honoring that gift by doing what you taught us to do: serving others, building community, and believing that everyone deserves a second chance. After the funeral, the family gathered at my house one final time. Mr. Rodriguez read the will. Everything went to the community trust, just as I'd specified. But there was one final surprise: a letter to Charles, Leo, and Penelope, to be read after my death. Charles opened it with shaking hands and read aloud, "My dear family, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But before I go, I wanted to leave you with one final thought. 7 years ago, you tried to steal $5 million from me. You saw that money as your ticket to the easy life, the comfortable life, the life where you didn't have to struggle or work or sacrifice. But here's what you didn't understand. That easy life would have destroyed you. It would have made you weak, entitled, empty. You would have spent the money and had nothing to show for it but regret and wasted years. Instead, I gave you something much more valuable. I gave you 5 years of hard work, 5 years of service, 5 years of learning to value people over possessions. And in those 5 years, you built something that $5 million never could have bought: character. You built Hope Center into a model program. You created transportation services that give seniors dignity and independence. You opened a memory care facility that treats people like people, not problems. More importantly, you built yourselves into people I'm proud to call family. So here's my final confession. The 5 years of unpaid labor wasn't punishment. It was preparation. I was preparing you to handle the real inheritance I was leaving you. Not money, but mission. Not wealth, but wisdom. Not possessions, but purpose. You complained that 5 years of work for maybe $500,000 each was unfair. And you were right. It was unfair. Because what you got was worth so much more than that. You got to become people who change lives, people who build communities, people who understand that the true measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they give. So yes, I made you work 5 years without pay, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because those 5 years made you rich in the ways that actually matter. I love you all. I'm proud of who you've become, and I know that the work you're doing will continue long after I'm gone. Touching lives I'll never know about, changing families I'll never meet, building a community I can only imagine. That's legacy. That's wealth. That's what it means to be truly rich. With all my love, Grandma Margaret. The room was silent, except for the sound of crying. Not sad crying, but that complicated mix of grief and gratitude that comes when you lose someone who changed your life. She got us, Leo said finally. She completely got us. She saw who we could be when we couldn't see it ourselves, Penelope added. Charles folded the letter carefully. You know what we have to do, right? What's that? Leo asked. We have to keep going. Keep building. Keep serving. Keep proving that she was right to believe in us. And they did. 10 years after my death, Hope Center operates in 50 cities. Charles runs the national organization, training new programs, advocating for restorative justice approaches to elder abuse. He never got rich from it, but he tells everyone who'll listen that he's the wealthiest man he knows. Leo's transportation service became a nationwide network. He partnered with rideshare companies to create volunteer driver programs specifically trained to work with elderly passengers. His ex-wife rejoined his life, not as his wife, but as his business partner and friend. He tells people that driving seniors around taught him patience, and patience saved his life. Penelope's memory care model was adopted by 30 facilities across the country. She wrote a book called Preserving Dignity, a new approach to memory care that became required reading in nursing programs. She married a man who works as a hospice chaplain, someone who understands the sacred work of caring for people at the end of their lives. She says that learning to honor other people's memories taught her to honor her own. And me? I'm just a footnote in their story now. The grandmother who refused to give up. The woman who chose redemption over revenge. The mother who believed her children were worth saving. But if you ask the folks at Hope Center, they'll tell you a different story. They'll tell you about Margaret Washington, who understood that punishment doesn't change hearts, but service does. Who knew that the best way to teach people to value elders is to make them serve elders? Who proved that even the worst betrayal can become an opportunity for transformation? They'll tell you that I was tough, uncompromising, that I made my family work harder than they'd ever worked in their lives, that I didn't let them quit when they wanted to, that I held them accountable every single day for 5 years. But they'll also tell you that I never stopped loving them. Never stopped believing they could change. Never gave up hope that the people who tried to throw me away could become people who devoted their lives to making sure no elder ever felt thrown away. And that's the truth of it. Love isn't soft. Love is fierce. Love demands better from us than we think we can give. Love sees potential where others see failure. Love believes in redemption when revenge would be easier. My family tried to steal my fortune. So I gave them 5 years of unpaid labor. And in return, they gave me something I never expected. Proof that people can change. Evidence that redemption is real. Hope for a future where families value their elders, not for what they have, but for who they are. Was it worth it? Ask the thousands of seniors who've been served by programs my family created. Ask the families who learned better ways to care for their elderly members. Ask Charles, Leo, and Penelope. who went from thieves to philanthropists. Because one old woman refused to give up on them, they tried to steal $5 million. Instead, they earned something priceless: the right to call themselves people of worth, people of character, people who serve. And that, my friends, is how you turn a betrayal into a legacy. Like this video if it touched something in you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what it means to be human, to be family, and to choose love even when it's complicated. I'll see you next time.